We didn't argue when we became a family. That's the part people find hardest to believe. There were no slammed doors, no raised voices, no obvious rejection. What happened was quieter than that, more reasonable, almost kind. Everyone kept saying we were lucky to have found love again, lucky the kids were handling it well, lucky that things seemed to work so smoothly. I repeated that story until it sounded true even to me. At first, I was determined to do everything right. I told myself that effort could prevent friction, that intention could replace time. We weren't careless. We were hopeful. Hope has a way of making speed feel justified. We moved forward because standing still felt like reopening wounds we wanted desperately to close. The house changed before anyone acknowledged it had. Rooms were reassigned, schedules merged. Objects migrated from one side of the space to another. None of it was dramatic. It was logistical. But even logistics carry emotional weight when they happen too quickly. I noticed it in the way footsteps sounded different in the hallway. In the way silence felt crowded instead of empty. Many hooks appeared early, though I dismissed them. A look exchanged between siblings that I couldn't read. A pause before someone answered a simple question. A joke that landed flat and was never repeated. These moments felt insignificant on their own. I told myself adjustment takes time. I didn't realize how little time we were actually giving it. We spoke often about being understanding, about compromise, about starting fresh. Those words became shields. Whenever discomfort surfaced, we labeled it temporary, growing pains, normal resistance. No one wanted to be the one who slowed things down. No one wanted to seem ungrateful for a second chance at family. I noticed how carefully everyone behaved. Too carefully. Conversations stayed polite. Conflicts were rerouted into silence. The children learned quickly what topics softened the room and which ones tightened it. I did the same. We weren't avoiding honesty, we were postponing it. And postponement has consequences. I started questioning my perceptions long before I questioned the situation. Was the tension real, or was I projecting my own fear of failure? Was the distance between siblings natural, or was I imagining fractures where none existed? I told myself that blended families were complicated by default, and that complexity didn't mean dysfunction. But complexity doesn't explain the constant vigilance. The way I monitored tone, the way I edited my words before speaking, the way everyone seemed to be performing the role of family instead of inhabiting it. We were together, but not settled. Connected, but not relaxed. The children never complained outright. That too became part of the illusion. Silence looked like acceptance. Cooperation looked like harmony. I ignored the fact that silence can also be strategy, that cooperation can be self-protection. Many hooks turned inward. I felt responsible for everyone's comfort. If someone withdrew, I assumed I had failed to integrate us properly. If siblings clashed quietly, I told myself it was sibling rivalry, nothing more. I took on the role of emotional moderator without realizing it, smoothing edges that needed to be examined instead. There were moments, small, telling ones, when I sensed something fundamental wasn't aligning. A child referring to the house as your place instead of home. A step-parent hesitating before correcting behavior, unsure of authority. A biological parent overcompensating, defending one child too quickly, creating imbalance without intending to. None of this was malicious. That's what made it so difficult to confront. We believed love would catch up to structure, that once everyone adjusted to the rules, the feelings would follow. It seemed logical, efficient. What we underestimated was how deeply loyalty runs in children, and how threatening sudden change can feel, even when framed as opportunity. I began noticing how often conflicts were framed as misunderstandings rather than disagreements, as if misunderstanding were accidental and disagreement were dangerous. We avoided naming resentment because naming it felt like inviting it to stay. Somewhere in the middle of this quiet tension, I encountered reflections, not solutions, not blame about family systems formed too quickly, about how blending households without blending grief creates invisible fractures, about how children don't resist new families because they don't want love, but because love feels like replacement when it arrives before mourning is finished. These ideas didn't accuse anyone. They simply described what I was witnessing. I tried slowing things down emotionally, even if nothing else slowed. I asked more questions, I listened longer. But by then, patterns had already formed. Roles had been assigned without discussion. Siblings had aligned and withdrawn. Step-parents have learned where they were welcome and where they were merely tolerated. The system was functioning but not healing. Many hooks intensified. I noticed how often I felt relief when everyone was in separate rooms, how calm returned when the house was quiet, how group gatherings required preparation, emotional and logistical. Family wasn't a resting place. It was an event. The erosion wasn't loud. It was cumulative. Each compromise made to keep the peace moved us further from authenticity. Each unspoken grievance hardened into assumption. We weren't fighting, but we weren't connecting either. The turning point didn't come with a blow-up. It came with an observation so simple it was impossible to ignore. We had built a structure faster than trust could grow inside it. The family existed in form, but not in rhythm. In the final quarter of this story, the psychological twist revealed itself slowly. The conflicts weren't rooted in personalities or discipline styles. They weren't even about favoritism, though that word hovered constantly. The real fracture was temporal. We had collapsed timelines that needed separation. The devastating insight was this: we hadn't allowed space for anyone to remain who they were before asking them to become something new. Grief, loyalty, identity, none of these had time to settle. They were expected to integrate on schedule. Once I saw that, the entire story reframed itself. The resistance wasn't defiance, it was preservation. The distance wasn't rejection, it was self-protection. The tension wasn't failure. It was information. What shifted wasn't the family overnight. What shifted was my understanding of control. I stopped trying to force cohesion. I stopped mistaking silence for success. I allowed relationships to exist at their own pace, even when that pace felt uncomfortable. Some bonds softened, others remained formal. Not everything healed neatly, but the power struggle dissolved not because authority was asserted, but because pressure was released. The family didn't fracture because it was flawed. It fractured because it was rushed. Looking back, the entire story changes meaning. We didn't fail at becoming a family. We simply tried to become one before everyone was ready to arrive. If this reflection resonates, if you've seen how good intentions can still create quiet damage, there is a thoughtful guide that explores relational patterns, like these with depth and clarity, without blame or drama. You can download the ebook in the description. The link is in the description.